So a lot of us here, like, we've had experience in the military community, and a lot of people poise the idea, like, I like to solve problems, I like to lead teams, I like to help people. Probably everybody here wants to do those three things in some way, shape, or fashion. How do you, I'm one of those people too, right? How do you kind of like drill down on that to find a focus area, I think, because it's very broad and it's good to know those things, but what would be your advice to somebody who wants to do those things, but isn't necessarily sure which direction to take it in?
It's a great question. I would say you could think of this in a lot of different ways. I like to simplify things because my own brain needs to simplify things to the lowest common denominator in order to process it well. So what I'll say is choose either what ignites your passion, your interest, or what you see as being a real gap within the Salesforce ecosystem. So you might be tremendously interested in, I'm going to choose something completely random, the adoption of dogs. So you might say, you know what? I want to see whether or not there are any nonprofits that are, or maybe veterinarian offices that are using Salesforce or want to use Salesforce, and identify some use cases and things like that where you can start proactively pursuing something like that and develop this niche expertise on how to track different dog breeds and adoption inquiries and how long it takes from the time someone inquires about adopting a dog until they actually adopt the dog. So you can just out of the blue identify, here's what gets me really excited, and pursue that. That's one way of identifying like a real match between what excites you and what keeps you busy during the day to help you pay your bills, hopefully, so you end up loving your job. Or the other option that I mentioned, which is identifying what the gap is in the Salesforce ecosystem, and hopefully you can find a way that aligns with a particular area of expertise and or passion that you have, and pursue it. And for that one, I'm going to give a perfect example for myself. One of the things that I did not mention, but I'm well known for in the Salesforce ecosystem, is associated with training, both end user training as well as admin training. There are many times that some large global companies, they leverage one of my competitors, a different consulting company to actually customize and implement, roll out Salesforce. But that consulting company, either they put their hands up in the air and say, yeah, end user training, we'd rather not, or that's not included, or for some reason the customer, the company themselves, they're like, can you get David Giller to do the end user training? Like, it's great that you did all this. Can you get David Giller to do the end user training? So a lot of times I am approached by companies that either by the consulting firm or by the company just to do end user training. So that's something that I do both for end users as well as for admin. Sometimes it's like a large global company that'll say, look, we've got like 15 to 30 people who are in IT. None of them know anything about Salesforce. We need to get them upskilled and we need to teach them Salesforce. So that's something that I do. I spend a lot of time doing that. It's a big part of my business. And let me rewind a little bit. When I was back in GE Capital and I was involved in the initial rollout, and I was on a very, very small team of people responsible for Salesforce across 10 different sub-businesses, 2,000 end users. And one day my boss turns to me. I will never forget this. One day my boss turns to me and she says, David, you know how your colleague, I'm not going to name her, your colleague is responsible for doing the end user training of Salesforce for all of our 2,000 users across 10 different sub-businesses? I'm like, yeah. And you know how she's taking on a new job and she's leaving soon? Yeah. And you know how I don't really have headcount to replace her? I'm like, okay, well, I need you to take on her responsibilities in addition to everything else that you're doing. I exploded on her. Steam was coming out of my ears. My face went red. I'm like, what on earth makes you think that I have any interest in doing end user training. You're like taking me like 30 steps backwards in my career. Do you realize that I'm an attorney? Do you realize that I did the actual rollout and configure? You want me to do end user training? I'm going to be the punching bag of every single sales rep that we have. They're not going to make time for me. They're going to blame me all of the data quality issues, all of the lack of user engagement issues, lack of user adoption issues are all going to be blamed on me, because the sales reps are going to say, yeah, that Giller guy, he either talks too fast, or I didn't understand him, or he wasn't available to answer my questions. I don't want to do that. And she looked at me. We had like a mother-son relationship. She looked at me, arms folded, just waiting for me to blow over. And she's like, I know, I still need you to do it. And I took it on in spite of the fact that I really did not want to. And while I took it on, I actually realized that there was a major gap in the Salesforce ecosystem in general when it comes to end user training. And usually, more often than not, the people who are involved in doing the business requirements gathering and the configuration and the project management to introduce enhancements in Salesforce, usually those people stereotypically are not the kind of personalities, folks who are comfortable getting at the front of a room and speaking or teaching people on how to use it in a way that the non-technical business user understands. And I guess part of it is my background, and part of it is the fact that I'm not technical, and part of the fact that like I couldn't care less about doing public speaking. Like I'm not seeking out those public speaking opportunities, but I'm totally comfortable being at the front of the room and everyone staring at me. So I teach it in a way that is relevant for them. I'm not teaching it to them saying, you see this button over here? Let me show you what this button does. Nobody gives a damn about a button. A sales rep wants to know, how do I find my customers and prospects? How do I update the customers and prospects? How do I find all of those customers and prospects or deals that require attention? So putting it within that perspective makes it super exciting for them. So I have come around full circle from hating everything about doing training to completely embracing it and loving it. And that's a major focus of what I do as a business of training. And I'm not doing it under duress. I'm doing it voluntarily and completely loving it. So that's a perfect example. Like the only reason why I'm focusing on that is because there's a huge need. And I think the need is so big that if every single one of you decided that from now forward, you're going to focus your careers on the exact same thing, I am not concerned from a competitive perspective whatsoever. There is so much of a need that it would be a wonderful thing for the Salesforce community if all of you decided you all wanted to be training experts on the Salesforce platform. So that was answering in a very long-winded way.
No, that was great. Thank you. I appreciate it.